We'll start with a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is items of interest, recognition, and inquiry, Board of Education members. I'd like to just send out a congratulations to the Marine City and St. Clair High School football teams. They're both in the playoffs, so we're all looking forward to some positive action this Friday night, Saturday night. Are they both playing on Friday night?
Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday, excellent. So we wish them the best of luck. Anybody else?
I would just like to give a shout out to our Great Start Readiness Program. It's the program here for our 4-year-olds. As most of you know, I work out at Van and Bosch Farms, and we offer field trips. And there was 35 of those 4-year-olds on Thursday. And I just want to thank Lisa Pettinger and her team. Those kids were so well behaved and very polite and very kind, and I think our community needs to check out this program. It's great. So I just wanted to say thank you to them.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just say congratulations to the St. Clair tennis team. They were 4th in the state recently in the state championship, and all 4 singles players made it to the championship game.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Anybody else? Administration?
Yeah, I've changed my mind. I'll go.
Okay.
I just wanted to take a moment to welcome Laura Taylor to the East China team. She is joining us as an elementary special education resource teacher, and she will be at Bell and Pine River Elementary. Count Day was at the beginning of October, and East China has an enrollment of 3,979 students for the 2019-2020 school year. And as we continue to experience our declining enrollment, this number is 118 students less than we had last October count day. I want to publicly thank Kirk Rizalko along with Dave Maru, and Dave Simpson, as we had building issues over the weekend, and they all worked together to problem solve each situation and have us ready for school this morning. I think there was some photos being taken and passed back and forth as to how to fix things and which knob to turn and where to turn it off. So I appreciate you guys working together so that everything was up and running this morning. And along those lines, the staff at EnviroClean has been working together with our teachers and principals to make sure that each day the classrooms are clean and ready to welcome students. And we want to send a special shout out to Bell River and Gearing Elementaries. Thank you for supporting each other. Thank you.
I do have one other thing. I want to thank Craig and his team for moving their offices. Their offices are no longer in the front of the building. They're behind us. And with everything that they do, they had to move their offices, and I just wanted to say thank you to them also.
As did Chartwell's. Chartwell's moved.
Yes, and I'm
Yep.
sorry, yes. I don't mean to leave anybody out,
Yep.
so.
Okay, the next item is special recognition, the East China Educational Foundation grants. Laura Karadimas and Kathy Brewer.
We have Mike pinch hitting for Laura Karadimas. Mike. He looks a little different, but
He does.
So I'm here with Mike tonight as part of the East China Foundation, and we will be giving foundation grants this evening. With the fall 2000 awards, we will, since the inception of the foundation, will have given over $166,000 in grant money. Tonight, there are 17 grants ranging from $209 to $750. With tonight's grants, we are giving out $9,989.85. Our first recipient this evening is Lisa Cohen from Gearing and Pine River Elementary. Lisa will be purchasing T-shirts, lunch treats, and play equipment that will be used when students participate and are paired with the LINK program. have to stay. Kelly Randolph from Gearing and Pine River Elementary. Kelly will be purchasing calming corner supplies to go into the calming boxes. Megan Hargrave from St. Clair Middle School. The middle schoolers are lucky enough to have Megan be purchasing a soft, comfy swing chair and accessories for the sensory break. Dave Simpson from the Performing Arts Center. Dave will be purchasing an interactive video monitor and a mount for the black box rehearsal room. Kathy Gribe from Bell River Elementary. Kathy plans to purchase flexible seating for her classroom, and it's going to include a futon, scoop chairs, folding chairs, wobble chairs, bean bags, and floor pillows. Michelle Davis from Gearing Elementary. Michelle will be purchasing STEM lessons from preschoolstem.com to support lessons in the classroom. She'll also be purchasing sensory bin and consumable materials. Jeannie Van Heck from Gearing Elementary. She's doing something exciting. She'll be purchasing materials for creating 2 sensory paths for students to obtain calming and organizing movement input. Steve Fox from Marine City High School. He'll be purchasing new marching band raincoats with his grant award. Kelly Robbins from Bell River Elementary. Kelly's going to be purchasing classic Lego bricks and accessories for use with STEM activities for the grades 1st through 5th. The students will learn the design process of ask, imagine, plan, create, test, and they'll improve through different activities. Kelly Robbins from Bell River Elementary. She'll be purchasing the Makey Makey STEM Pack Classroom Invention Literacy Kit. Megan Jenks from Gearing Elementary. Megan will be purchasing the complete set of the Big Book Storytelling Activity Kits. That's cool. Jennifer Antonelli from Gearing Elementary. Jennifer will be purchasing 3 very cool mini light tables with accessories for all 3 of the kindergarten classrooms at Gearing. And she'd like all of the kindergarten teachers to come up. Michael McPherson from Marine City High School will be purchasing 39 yoga balls for use in his classroom. Lori Hannon from St. Clair Middle School. Mrs. Hannon will be using her grant awards to purchase art towers to display the students' artwork in the building. Rachel Radigan from Gearing. Rachel will be creating a calming corner for students with materials she'll be purchasing. Amber Pfeiffer from Bell River Elementary is getting a very cool, flexible seating for her classroom. Jessica Jones from Pine River Elementary. Jessica will be purchasing the Fontes and Pinnell Kindergarten book set. Congratulations to our 2019 fall recipients. We at the foundation will accept grant money, donated anytime through the year. Everybody can scoot. We have another fundraiser coming up, the Chili Heart 5K Run and Walk on February 8th. We hope to see everyone there, and we'd like to get some nice friendly competition between our PTOs and all of our buildings.
I love all the board members skip. Congratulations again.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the academic spotlight. It's Gearing Elementary this month with Philip Russell, the principal, and the Kids Club.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Cybula. I'm Phil Russell, the principal of Gearing Elementary. I'd like to introduce Kelly Randolph. She's teacher consultant at Gearing, and Lisa Kane, social worker at Gearing as well. At the end of last year, Lisa and Kelly approached me about a program that they did some research on. We were trying to figure out a way to bring the kids into the building in sort of a relaxed, calm manner, and to let them out of the building in a relaxed and calm manner. Some of our certain students, some of our special students get a little excited when 470 kids are coming in at once and 470 kids are leaving at once. So we talked about it, and now tonight we would like to show you our kids club. So. There you go.
So Kids Club, what is Kids Club? It's a 2 or 3 tier intervention, and it's to help the kids start their day in a calm, self-regulated manner. It's to help their brains with executive functioning. Currently, we have 6 students participating in Kids Club at Gearing and at Pine River Elementary. It's kind of like a check-in, check-out system, if you will. Many of the students come into school in a heightened state of anxiety. This can be due to several reasons: home influences, noisy bus ride. So the Morning Kids Club helps get kids out of the chaos in the start of the day and lets them enter the classroom when things are calm and everyone is ready to start their day. At the end of the day, the process at the end of the day can also be very anxiety producing. Kids Club gets students 10 to 15 minutes before their bell rings to talk about their day and get on the bus in a self-regulated manner. Kids Club also builds relationships. It helps with self-regulation. It promotes mindfulness, helps with executive functioning, helps every day. It helps practice daily calming strategies twice a day. We front load the students on their day, maybe what their goals are for behavior and stuff like that, and it helps students feel more connected to the school and each other. So in the morning, they come in and they are greeted by a special ed staff and an adult para support, and it's usually the same 2 people that work with the kids each day. They have a lunch choice that they do, and if they've ordered breakfast, they have breakfast. There's usually calming music going on. We do restorative community building circle. We do yoga, which my idea was to do yoga tonight, but Phil said we didn't have enough time for that. And then number 4 is we ask them, what do you need for today? Do you have a snack? Do you have your pencil? Do you need a hug? Do you have your homework? We're looking through backpacks for notes. And then we give them a hug or a high five or a fist bump and make sure they know that they're special, and off they go to class. The end of the day routine, we ask them again if they need snacks. They're always hungry. And we ask them how their day was, if it's a thumbs up, thumbs down. Sometimes we have to have a talk about what we can do to make it better the next day. Again, yoga. We use, the site is Go Noodle, very popular right now with kindergarten, first grade. It's a go-to. And then we get the kiddos out 2 to 3 minutes before the rest of the students are dismissed to exit. That way they're calm and they're quiet and they're just kind of going on out without the chaos of the hustle and bustle in the hallway. What's left? Oh, and now Lisa's going to show us some clips of some good stuff also.
Okay, so part of the reason that we wanted to do this program is to help with self-regulation, calming, and get our students from their back brain up to their front brain. And their front brain is the part that controls their self-regulation, their emotions, able to calm themselves, things like that. And that's part of becoming a trauma-informed building. There's a lot of research and talk right now about ACEs and being a trauma-informed school and things like that. So this clip is going to tell us a little bit about that.
What does it mean to make the world a better place?
Nice! So those are those big questions we're focusing on. For me, being trauma-informed has so much to do with mindset, accepting that different people come into a school setting with incredibly varied life experiences. Some of those life experiences may be traumatic, and the way in which that plays out in my particular classroom could look a number of ways. And by me having that lens, it makes it less about are they doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and more about where is that behavior coming from, why is that happening.
Adverse childhood experiences like poverty, neglect, exposure to violence can bring about overwhelming stress, which can cause negative effects on the learning brain and on behavior. If children have the experience of adversity, they will have uneven development of these foundational skills like self-regulation and executive function or relationship skills. These are the children who are at risk to fall further and further behind. But the good news is that there is a powerful antidote to stress, and that is the effect of the human relationship and the presence of trust. Schools are an ideal place to produce many different kinds of relationships that are capable of buffering stress. Schools themselves can be healing places.
If you're fearful, if you're anxious, if you're distracted about something that's happened to you, you literally can't learn. Your brain shuts down. So it's essential to give kids social and emotional tools that allow students to recover from the challenges that they have experienced. Take actual classroom time to work on the building blocks of how to perceive your emotions, how to talk about them, how to get along with other people, how to take a moment and become calm when you need to, how to express your needs so that others can meet them.
When we start to understand what it takes to be responsive to the effects of trauma, we need to think about the environment, about individual services, and we need to think about the skills and mindsets of kids that won't develop as they should when they're impacted by trauma.
I do a lot of work around self-awareness and being able to name emotions and then make a choice around those.
When I get mad, I take deep breaths, and that helps me get more calm.
Many of the things that we think about doing for kids who may have experienced trauma are good for everybody. And everyone will encounter some kind of adverse circumstance at some point in their life. And for some children, we're helping them deal with what's already happened in their lives. For others, we're preparing them to deal with the challenges later in their lives.
If you can hear my voice, say, "We are awesome." We are awesome.
Okay, so I know that we probably only have these type of kids at Pine River and Gearing. I'm sure no other school probably has these types of kids. So we felt like we really needed to do something to help some of our, what we call our high flyers, to help come into the building in a calm manner and exit the building in a calm manner, because I think it does nothing but set your day off even worse when you come in and you're already in a heightened state of anxiety, and then your teacher's asking you to sit down and what do you want for lunch, and you're already all hyped up. So we try to get them calm, practice those calming strategies while they are calm, because they're not good to practice when you're in the moment. You can't say, calm down, take a deep breath when a kid's melting down. It doesn't work that way. So we try to practice all those things while they are calm, so that way, hopefully, when they do have those issues, we can refer back to those things. That's not working. Our data, right now I think it's too early to look at our data because we just started it the first week of school, but we will have some better data I think towards the end of the year. We do have a couple students that used to miss the bus regularly because they were in such a heightened state of anxiety, and to date they've not missed it one time this year. So I think that's promising for us. And this is just a clip of one of our Kids Club members.
Here we go. Okay, Michael, tell me about Kids Club.
Well, we go in the morning and at the end of the day. At the beginning of the day, we go and ask questions about what we're gonna plan of the day, and then we do a go noodle, and then we go back to class, and at the end of the day, we go ahead and ask questions of how our day went, and ask a couple more questions about something else. And we would always do a go noodle at the end of the day, and sometimes do a go noodle and a special thing if we had time at the end of the day.
Okay, do you think Kids Club helps you?
Yeah.
How does it help you?
By doing go noodles and calming down and spending time with the friends I with the friends I know the most.
Okay. Do you want to keep coming to Kids Club?
Yes.
All right.
Forever. Until the end of the school year.
Okay, thank you.
So he's one of our Kids Club members who I think has been pretty successful. That's all. We just wanted to kind of give you a short snippet. Does anyone have any questions?
Are they special ed students or general ed students?
Both.
Both. And if a kid's not in the club but having a bad day, can they come, or?
No, that was actually a question that we dealt with the first or second week of the school year, because a bunch of kids wanted to get in and say, what's going on in there? I want to get in that room and that. And so it was like, no, we're going to kind of be able to pick and how we're going to work with that. But we've stuck with our 6 that we have right now, and I think we're pretty comfortable with where we are.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Yep.
Great program.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a consent agenda. A motion is needed for the approval of minutes from our September 23rd, 2019 regular meeting, approval of payment of bills, the financial statement, schedule of investments, and the appointment of a new teacher.
So moved.
Support?
Are there any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. The next item on our agenda is recognition of persons wishing to address the board. And I just want to let everybody know that I do have some green cards. And if you're not familiar with the way this part of our meeting is run, it's for citizens to address any questions or comments to the board. The board will listen, take comments and questions under advisement, but we're not able to respond at this time. The presiding officer, which would be the superintendent, will refer back to the questions for research and get you a response. So the first green card I have this evening is from Kendall Copenhagen.
Hi, board.
Hi.
I didn't really prepare anything. I was waiting for the superintendent's report, but we're doing this first. So I came to talk about Palms Elementary. Lots of rumors going around, and it sounds like it's a done deal. I think that's the wrong choice. If you ask any teacher in Marine City School District about Palms kids, they always have great things to say about Palms kids. If you look at the test scores that come out of Palms, they're always at the top. And there's a reason for that, and it's because Palms works. And the kids that go to Palms, and the teachers at Palms, and the parents at Palms all work together. If you're going to do it, I ask that you don't draw it out like Eddie got drawn out. Because you gave them hope, and then it got shut down. And if these kids are gonna get split up and separated into different schools, it's better just to do it than to think they're gonna have these friends forever. because I live on the outside of the district, or not the district, but the line for Palms, and I know that if Palms gets shut down, my second grader is going to lose all of the friends that she's made since kindergarten, and that's a really hard thing to explain to her. I know there's a couple other Palms parents here and some Palms staff, and I know that the district needs to change, but I don't think this is the answer. And when you guys did the, for the millage, the bond for the millage, all the paperwork said Palms was fine. We didn't need to do that much to Palms. And now all we're hearing is, oh, Palms needs this, Palms needs that. It doesn't create a lot of trust there, I guess, is my point. And I hope that you think about it a little bit more before you decide to do anything. Thanks.
Thank you, Kendall. The next card I have is for Jamie Kelly.
I have a student at Palms Elementary too, and right now all we have is hearsay, of course, about what's going to happen with Palms. So I did attend with the superintendent, who was nice enough to have coffee with us about at the beginning of the month. That opened up a lot of clarity as to what she was seeing and what she's looking at and what you guys in turn would also look at for Palms. So if today's meeting, she proposes to close Palms Elementary, I would like to give a formal written request that we can have a special meeting, because I called the school district this morning and said, okay, if it is proposed that Palms get closed today, when would that vote happen? Well, subsequently that's 30 days from now, which is actually parent-teacher conferences, which would mean that parents and teachers can't even attend on the day that you guys are going to make a gigantic decision. So I have a written request for that I'll pass to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Being that 30 days from now, very important minds and thoughts and points of view on closing Palms would not be able to be here, I think that having a special meeting would be a very important thing. Palms Elementary, I understand that we're looking at a bunch of numbers, but the families from Palms are the future of the school district. There are a lot of school of choice that go to Palms. Actually, almost a fifth of the school is school of choice. I've talked to every single one of those parents, and I know that they're going to go to other districts, and that's not because we want to. I am a school of choice. I vetted Palms Elementary. I went to every elementary school within a 30-mile radius to see what I was going to do with my son and my future daughter, who I would love to go to Palms. Palms Elementary is unlike any other elementary school. The teachers are irreplaceable. The staff is irreplaceable. Moving them elsewhere, maybe that's a possibility, but we don't want that to be a possibility. There was, just at the beginning of this year, a bond which we're all well aware of. And in this bond, we talked about improving Palms. Not fixing Palms, because there's nothing wrong with Palms, but making improvements to Palms. As we know, the bond didn't go through. We loved the bond, it didn't work. There was a plan B to consolidate and help with those numbers. Plan B didn't happen, even though Plan B was told that it was going to happen. So now, we've closed an elementary school to help the numbers. My guess is that it's going to be proposed that Palms gets closed to help with those numbers again. There's got to be another solution to help with the numbers. there are families that are bringing the numbers in, and we're going to lose numbers by closing Palms, unfortunately. I don't know. I just hope that we could have a special meeting to allow more parents, possibly teachers. I don't know if the teachers are going to say anything, but right now, parents don't know that Palms may close. After today, we may know that, and I'd like to give them the ability to come up here and talk to you guys, give them your opinion. Maybe someone has an idea that would help the numbers. I'm not that person, but I could not come here and talk to you guys and tell you how important and how detrimental to our community and our future closing Palms would be. So thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jamie. Okay, I have one more green card from Ben Heath.
Hi.
Hi.
We school of choice my kids into Palms when we lived in Clay Township. We now live in the Bell River District, and we still school of choice our kids to Palms. There are social and cultural differences between these two schools that red and black spreadsheet doesn't show. You couple that with the geographic location of Palms Elementary, and the options that obviously brings to Richmond, to Anchor Bay, local private schools. You're going to lose a larger number of students than you're considering. And those students would be the future of this district that we started off the conversation with. Gosh, we're down another 200 people. Yeah, wanted to make sure that the spreadsheets can reflect that. Secondly, there was a plan A and a plan B to the last bond. I'm a huge bond fan. My wife was on the advocacy committee. This wasn't plan B, right? You didn't pass the bond, we didn't pass the bond for two reasons. You have those that'll never pass a bond, and the other one is those that don't trust the district and don't trust the board. By not following plan B, you have effectively told these people they're correct. And I think that's unfortunate. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, the next item on our agenda is item number 7, information discussion items. We'll start with Marine City High School Panama trip.
Okay, that is me. I am speaking for Marine City High School Spanish teacher Kristin Humble. She wanted me to bring to your attention that at the next board meeting, she would like to have your permission in a vote to take a group of students on a Panama trip. She's setting this trip for spring break, April 2021. She will be using Educational Tours, EF Tours. It's the same tour company that we've used in St. Clair and Marine City for our student tours. And she's wanting the board to know that this tour even offers high school credit or college credits if the student follows through with some work after the traveling. It's a cross-curricular event, and so Paul Dimmer, a science teacher at Marine City High School, is going to be the other chaperone on the trip. They had their first interest meeting last week and already have 13 travelers plus the 2 chaperones signed up to go, and they are hoping to have 25 to 30 travelers total by April of 2021. She has given me the proposed travel documents that I can share with you if you have any further questions regarding this exciting trip to Panama for Marine City High School in April of 2021. Are there any questions?
Any questions? No, I'm glad they're choosing South America. Everybody always goes to Europe, and South America is an amazing.
Yeah, it looks like lots of fun.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Relocation of Kids Connection and the construction, Mr. Kirk Kazakh.
Good evening, everyone. The discussion item of the relocation of the Kids Connection program. Due to the closing of Eddy and the need to relocate the Kids Connection program, bid specifications were developed to meet the requirements for moving that program over here to the central office. These programs have specific facility requirements and the proposed construction is directly in line with meeting those requirements. Some of the necessary changes include the addition of bathrooms, sinks, air conditioning, improved lighting, and fire safety systems. The project required 5 different specific trades RFPs to be bid out. They are as follows: the carpentry, demolition trade, the resilient flooring, painting, mechanical, and electrical. In conjunction with TMP Architecture and George Hawk Construction, we held the bid openings on September 24th. In the preceding days, we then conducted the post-bid interviews and completed those. As a result of that process, we are now making the recommendation that the lowest responsive bidders for each trade be awarded the contracts for this construction. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have in regards to this project.
Kirk, could we reiterate why we're making this move, and due to the fact of the eddy closure and wanting to vacate that property?
Sure. As we all know, the eddy structure is quite large. The only remaining programs that we have over there are this Kids Connection program, which only takes up 3 classrooms out of that whole building. One of the main reasons for closing that building is the current condition of the building itself, and how we struggle to try to do all the maintenance and do all the capital improvements that are needed for that facility that was built in the 30s. And so in order to get the Kids Connection program out of that building into another building, this was the best site for that, being that we already have some programs here, and then there was the space. And so, and most importantly, economically, with the requirements that those programs need, this space really fit that requirement well, with the amount of changes that needed to be done. So, getting everybody out of that building is imperative, and that's why we're doing this relocation.
Okay, and are these cost sinking fund eligible?
Yes, they are. It will be paid for with the sinking fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? Other questions?
Can you just give a quick walkthrough on the electrical work that would be done?
Sure. As a part of the electrical work, you have the mechanical portion, which includes putting a new rooftop compressor system. You have to supply the power and the controls that go up to the roof for that system. We have some lighting upgrades that are going to take place. And then the biggest component part of the electrical trades contract is going to be the fire safety system. Tying into the existing system that we have and running it to all the places that it needs to go, and installing all that stuff is the biggest piece of that electrical project.
Thanks.
So the 3 classrooms that we're vacating, the work that we're doing is to basically recreate those 3 classrooms here, correct?
Yeah, to make these spaces suitable to meet the requirements of that program. Like, some of the specific requirements are to have more than one, to have 2 sinks, to have certain amount of space, to have, bathrooms, to have controlled environment as far as temperature. So all the things that we're doing are directly in line with meeting the requirements for those programs.
When do we want to have this completed, Kirk?
The goal is to have it completed so we could possibly move them over the Christmas break. That is a very aggressive timeline, and we're certainly going to do everything we can to meet that timeline. But whenever you go into a project, there's always some unknowns that you might come across. We actually have to go into some of the floors to install wastewater drains and electrical, and the fires, you got controls. And so it's a pretty good sized project, but right now it is the goal, and I don't see any reason right at this very moment why we can't do it in that time frame.
And are we anticipating that with this move, since we'll be centrally located, we'll be better able to
Meet the needs of
the
both ends.
whole
Yep.
entire district.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they can be, more collaborative when they're all together.
Right. And the central location, I think, is a good move.
Yeah.
Me too.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, Kurt.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next item on our agenda are reports. The first report is the superintendent's report, and the board should all have the superintendent performance evaluation calendar at your desk. Okay, Ms.
Yep.
Ibula?
Thank you. For each board member, today I sent a digital copy of the documents that are in front of you that are the superintendent performance evaluation timeline and goals. The outline goals are a continuation of our district strategic planning process. And just as a reminder, it seems quite a while ago, but it was actually only 2 years ago today, the October 2017 board meeting, that the district received its final report from Cindy Ganson from MASB regarding our strategic planning process that took about a year, where we had the meetings, the workshops, and identified at the end of all that 4 goals for our school district. And these outcomes were presented, like I said, on the October 2017 board meeting exactly 2 years ago. So I've identified those 4 goals and made them part of my performance evaluation. And just a reminder of those goals. The first one was to implement a district-wide multiple-tiered system of support, implement a systematic marketing plan to promote positive, clear, concise information to the community in our surrounding districts, implement professional learning communities by building and by district, and create a comprehensive building plan with community input. For each of these goals, I have outlined action steps, timelines, and evidence for progress towards the goals. And following the timeline, I will continue to provide the school board with updates on the progress of each of these goals and answer questions along the way. We don't need to wait until a specific day, to ask questions as to how we're moving. But I will use the timeline outlined to make sure that we have, at minimum, a formal update during those times. Are there any questions?
No questions? Anybody?
Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll move on to our next report. We have the pleasure of Mr. Curtis McBride being here this evening to go over our 2018-19 audit.
Good evening, school board, Superintendent Sabula. My name is Curtis McBride, and I'm a CPA for McBride Manley and Company. We are the firm that audits the school district's financial statements. I am the engagement partner, and I'm the managing partner for our firm. And with me this evening is Samantha Hudson. She is our audit manager, and she was very essential and critical throughout the process of the audit. And we are here this evening to present the results of our June 30, 2019 audit of the school district. Now, before I get into the slides, I want to talk about our audit opinion, which is actually the most important thing involved in the audit. So there are 3 types of opinions you can receive from your auditor. There is what we call a clean or unmodified audit opinion, which means that we believe your financial statements are reliable and they're in compliance with our professional standards. And then there's what we call a modified audit opinion, which means that we feel they're in compliance for the most part, but there may be a few minor exceptions. And then there's what we call an adverse audit opinion, which means that we do not feel that they're reliable and they're not in accordance with our professional standards. So I do want to announce, first off, that for June 30, 2019, the district received a clean or unmodified audit opinion from our firm. So that's the highest opinion you can receive from your auditor. Now, I do also want to clarify that we're just simply providing an opinion on the reliability of the financial information. The purpose of our audit is not to provide an opinion on the financial health of the district. That's not the focus of our audit. Moving on to the slides. The first fund I want to talk about is the general fund. Now, the general fund primarily derives its revenues from property taxes, state aid, and federal, state, and local grant monies. So in looking at the balance sheet for the year ended June 30, 2019, you can see the general fund finished the year with total assets of about just over $9.2 million. You had liabilities against those assets of about $5.2 million, and you finished the year with an ending fund balance of just over $4 million. Now, I'll talk about the fund balance level in a little bit more detail in my subsequent slides. Here we're looking at the general fund revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So this is the income statement, if you will, for the year ended June 30, 2019. You can see that the general fund generated about $41.463 million of revenues during the year, and you spent about $41,167,000 during the year. So you actually had a net increase to your general fund balance of about $296,000 during the year. And as I mentioned in my previous slide, you finished the year with an ending fund balance of just over $4 million. Now, to put that into perspective, the state of Michigan recommends that your fund balance level be at about 10% of annual expenditures. Now, for June 30, 2019, your general fund was at about 9.74%. So it was a little bit less than the recommended from the state of Michigan. And I have a subsequent slide coming up here in a few slides where I compare East China's fund balance level compared to other districts throughout the state of Michigan. So you have that for some comparative data. In this slide, we're looking at general fund revenues by source. Here we're comparing 2018 to 2019. You can see in 2018, the general fund generated about $40,788,000 in revenues. That came up to about $41,463,000 for 2019. So it was a slight increase of about 1.65%. So you can see property taxes generated about $14,649,000. Your state aid was about $23.7 million. So those really made up the lion's share of your revenues in the general fund during the year. In the next slide, we're looking at general fund expenditures by function, again comparing 2018 to 2019. Now, when you look at these functions, you can see that the largest function would actually be basic programs. Now, what basic programs is it's the actual costs of the school buildings themselves. So it'd be, all the teacher salaries, the benefits, supplies, anything you would need for the actual schools themselves. So it would make sense that basic programs would be the largest function in the district. So you can see basic programs came in at about $22.3 or $22.4 million, or roughly 54% of your general fund budget. Another major function would be added needs. That's primarily your special education program. So you can see you spent about $4.5 million for added needs, and that was roughly 11% of your budget. Another major function would be operations and maintenance. So you can see you spent about $3.3 million in operations and maintenance, which made up about 8% of your annual budget. And you can see that total expenditures actually went from about $41,239,000 in 18 to about $41,167,000 in 19. So about a 0.17% decrease, so roughly the same. In this next slide, we're looking at general fund expenditures by type. Here we're looking at 3 years, 17, 18, and 19. You can see that the largest expenditure by type would be, salaries and then benefits, the costs related to those salaries. And obviously a school district is very labor intensive. In order to carry out the mission of the school district, you need to pay teachers and administrators in order to educate the students throughout the district. So you would expect salaries and benefits to be the largest expenditure by type. So you can see you spent about $21.8 million in salaries. You had about $14 million in benefits. And as I mentioned, you spent about $41,167,000 in the general fund during the year. Now in this next slide, we're getting into some trend analysis. Here we're going all the way back to 2012 for your general fund. We have revenues on the left and expenditures on the right. So you can see for revenues, you actually generated about $41.83 million in revenues back in 2012. And that number fell all the way down to about $39.7 million in 2015. and it is up now to about $41,463,000 in 2019. Now, the interesting thing about this is if we actually went back further, so for instance, if we went back to 2007 in this analysis, your general fund actually generated about $47.3 million in 2007. So at $41.46 million in 2019, that's $5.9 million less in revenues that you generated in 2019 than you did in 2007. So you have substantially less to work with in your operating budget in your general fund. And that's primarily tied to student population. So in that school year in 2007, when you compare it to 2019, you actually had about 1,300 less students in the district in the 18-19 school year than you did in the 2007 school year. So because the way school districts are funded throughout the state of Michigan with the state aid, this all changed with Proposal A was introduced into our Constitution in 1994. Prior to that, school districts were primarily focused through property taxes. That's no longer the case. So the state of Michigan actually allocates each school district what they call a per pupil funding. So that means it's a per student funding. And for the 18-19 school year, you received $8,137 per student in funding. So the way that works, I don't want to get into too much of it, but you are funded the combination of the property taxes that you generate and the state aid. The combination of those two can never be more than $8,137 per student that you have in your district. So the way that works is if you generate more in property taxes, the state of Michigan will actually reduce your state aid down so that you cannot generate more than that $8,137 per student that you were allocated to at the beginning of the school year. And you can see, looking at expenditures on the right, you have a very similar relationship. You can see your peak year for expenditures was in 2012 at $42.1 million. Came down in 2015 to $39.8 million. That's because you were required to budget accordingly for the loss of revenues. And you can see it came up to $41,167,000 for the year ended 2019. Now this next slide, we're looking at your general fund financial data compared to other Michigan school districts. And this information is actually obtained from the Michigan Department of Education. It's in a bulletin, Bulletin 1011. Now you can see East China School District is on the far left, and then on the right, we're comparing it to other districts throughout the state. Now, in my opinion, the most important information that can be gleaned from this slide is when you look at the bottom, the total fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, you are currently sitting at about 9.74%. If you look at the average of all districts, which is the second from the right, the average was actually 13.78% of annual expenditures, which was higher than East China's during the year. However, if you look at districts of similar size to East China, which is the last column, it was at about 9.35%. So that's pretty much right on par with where your fund balance was. Yours is actually a little bit higher than the average of districts in similar in size to East China. So that would be districts with a student population of 4,000 to 4,499 students. That's what they're talking about, of districts of similar size. I want to talk about two more funds briefly. The debt service fund. Now this fund primarily derives its revenues from property taxes. And the important thing to note about this fund is its resources cannot be used for general operating purposes. In other words, you can't transfer money over from the debt service fund to the general fund. You can see that it had total assets of about $719,000 at the end of the year, and it had an ending fund balance of about $719,000. Now, at the end of 2019, you had about $7,515,000 in outstanding bonds. That's made up of three bonds. You had one that had a balance of about $3.87 million, and that matures in 2021. You had another one of about $2.6 or $2.7 million, which matures in 2022, and the third one is just over $1 million and matures in 2025. Now, the other important thing to note about this is the money has to be used for the purchase of school buses throughout the district. That's the primary purpose of this fund. Another thing that you should know is that back in 2015, you actually did refinance one of the bonds, and it actually did save the district about $1.5 million over the life of that bond because of the more favorable terms, specifically the interest rate. In looking at the income statement for the debt service fund, you can see it generated about $5,172,000. You spent about $5,150,000, which is the payment of the actual bonds, the principal and interest payments, and you finished the year with an ending fund balance of $719,000. Now, the final fund I want to talk about is the sinking fund. Now, this is similar to the debt service fund in that its resources are restricted for a specific purpose. You cannot transfer money from the sinking fund over to the general fund for general operating purposes. And again, this fund derives its revenues from property taxes, and it's for the purchase of real estate for school buildings and the construction of school buildings and major additions and repairs to school buildings. In other words, you can't use these funds for routine maintenance in buildings, but they can be for major capital improvements. In looking at the balance sheet, you can see you had about $519,000 of assets on hand. You had $62,000 of liabilities against those assets to finish the year with an ending fund balance of about $457,000. Here we're looking at the income statement for the sinking fund. You can see you generated about $733,000 of revenues during the year. You spent just over $1 million during the year and ended the year with a fund balance of about $457,000 in your sinking fund. I just want to briefly talk about the audit process in general. What we do is we look at the major accounting functions when we perform our audit. So we're looking at purchasing, cash receipts, payroll, all the major accounting functions, and making sure there are proper internal controls over those functions. And then, of course, we do our normal audit procedures to independently reconcile the ending balances that you have in your own internal records to make sure that we can, provide what we call a clean or unmodified audit opinion on these financial statements. So as a result of our audit procedures, we were able to determine that your financial statements and your financial records are reliable and they're in accordance with our professional standards, which is why you got a clean opinion from our audit firm. That's all I have. Any questions from board members?
I have one.
Yes.
How could you tell if someone was embezzling money from a PTA treasurer to a board member? You read about in the paper clerks who've been stealing thousands for years. How do they get away with it? I mean,
sure.
What do we have in place to prevent that from happening in our district?
I would say I want to talk a little bit about fraud in general. There are three things that occur in every fraud. There is the pressure to commit the fraud, there's the rationalization to commit the fraud, and there's opportunity for the fraud to occur. So, when we discuss this with clients and we do training sessions, a lot of people in our firm are also involved in local nonprofit organizations, so we deal with this on your side of the table also. When you think about those three things that are always present in fraud, you have no control over two of them. You have no control on whether or not someone can rationalize fraud or that they have some sort of pressure to commit the fraud. In other words, pretty much anyone given the right set of circumstances, unfortunately, in their life, are capable of committing a fraud. So, maybe you have a sick child at home, and without being able to obtain extra money, something terrible may happen to your child. If you put someone in that situation, they clearly have the pressure to commit the fraud. They can certainly rationalize the fraud in their minds. However, what you focus on is the opportunity to commit the fraud. You need to take away the opportunity to commit the fraud so that you mitigate that risk. So what you should be focusing on internally, and what we focus on externally as part of our audit, is that you have what we call a quality system of internal controls. So what that means is, we look at those major accounting functions. Are there good controls over the purchasing process? Do you have one person that's involved in that entire process, or do you have a segregation of duties? Do you have 3 or 4 people involved so that the potential for fraud, you can never 100% get rid of the risk of fraud, but if you have proper procedures in place, you can definitely mitigate that risk. So that's really what you have to focus on is, that someone doesn't have the receipt in custody and recording of cash in transactions. So that's primarily what we focus on in our audit is we test your controls. Number one, do you have good accounting controls? And number two, are they working as planned? Are they functioning? That's kind of a big overview of it. And then specifically when you're talking about like PTOs, for instance, I would say the most critical thing for them would be education. A good example is, I know Tina, every November, and we're actually present at the meeting too, she provides a training session to all the PTOs in the district. And me and my staff are also available for that. And we actually give some handouts, to the members. And, we have a discussion about what are proper internal controls? What does that mean? So for the PTOs, have you set a budget for the year? Is someone performing bank reconciliations on a monthly basis? Are all the members of the PTO group receiving monthly financial statements? I would say for groups like the PTOs, education is very important. And then, for the district administratively, just making sure that you do have a system of internal controls in place and that they're functioning as intended. I would say, in some of those specific situations where maybe people get away with fraud, I would say that they probably don't have a good system of internal controls because one person probably has too much control over a major process. That's generally why that occurs.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Curtis.
Thank you, Curtis. Okay, our next report is the enrollment and facility utilization. Mrs. Cybula, Mrs. Dimick, and Mrs. Thrift.
Good evening, President Frank, trustees. Tonight's enrollment and facility assessment presentation will be conducted in a team of myself, Dawn Demick, and Suzanne Cybula. Tonight's presentation includes fund equity review, student count projections, building utilization, administration recommendation, and concluding with questions and answers. To begin, I'm going to continue talking about finances, but I promise it will be very brief. This historical fund balance or fund equity slide is not new information. I normally include this with every budget update. This is so we can keep an eye on our financial position. This reminds us where we used to be, where we are now, and most importantly, to give indication of what the future direction should be. So to kind of break apart this chart, on the far left-hand column is the fiscal year. It is showing 16 years, going back to 2003, 2004. The second column is the total expenditures for the year. The third column is the audited net revenues over expenditures. So obviously a negative is a use of fund balance or equity. The fourth column is the end of the year fund balance. And the last column is the fund balance, the percentage of total expenditures. 2003 and 4, you can see that we were at 15.5% with a steady decline. And this year, we had a slight 0.75% to our fund balance to an increased 9.7 to our total expenditures for this year. Previous district policy was to maintain a 7% fund balance to expenditures. However, in 2014, the district reduced the board policy to allow fund equity at 7%. This reduced policy came with the understanding that the district would continue its efforts to gain its 10% fund balance. As we further analyze this information over the 16-year history shown, 12 of those years resulted in the use of fund balance, and 4 of those years fund balance was increased. In each one of those years, the district has adjusted expenditures to minimize the use of fund balance. A key component to minimizing fund equity or fund balance is to carefully monitor our revenues and expenditures each year. And staffing and student levels are at the heart of the revenues and expenditures. Student levels account for 81% of our revenues each year through our foundation allowance, and staffing uses about 87% of our expenditures through salaries and benefits. But tonight we're just going to focus on our student levels, and we're going to save staffing for the budget revision coming up in a month or so. In Curtis McBride's presentation, he reminded you how school district funding works. The amount of revenue received from foundation allowance is fixed in an amount per student, so pupil enrollment decreases, so does revenues. And this information from the fund balance history chart, it's the same information, but it's displayed in a line chart. The line provides a visual picture for trend analysis, and this 16-year period of changes in fund balance shows a consistent declining trend. It's very clear that the district needs to maintain the remaining fund balance equity and adjust the expenditure levels accordingly. I previously stated that the student levels determine the majority of our revenues, so you could say that our revenues dictate how much expenditures we need to spend. We can spend each year, and that's to maintain our just about 10% fund balance levels. And during the budget development, changes in student levels are projected to give foundation allowance levels for that year. And this chart tells us how well our predictions have been. And this, again, is not new information. I include this with every budget update so that we can see what we're predicting and how we resulted. So in the chart in the left-hand corner, starting with the school year, there are 5 years, 2015-16 through 2019-20. Our fall count, of which our budget was based off of, is the second column. The fall count is the third column, and then finally is the variance. You can see over the 5 years, the district is slightly conservative with the projections that we have been given. And then the chart on the right is just for a visual. And over the last 5 years, an interesting observation, the 2 years of 16 and 17 and 18 and 19, when the fall pupil enrollment was higher than projected, you can see that the district actually incurred a large bump or a bump in their foundation allowance for that year. That's just to show the dramatic impact of the level of pupils each year. Now that I've reminded you of the importance of the relationship between pupil levels and the district's finance, Dawn Demick will explain to you the who's, what's, when's, where's, and everything you need to know about pupil enrollment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Good evening, President Frank and members of the board. As Tina mentioned, I am going to be talking about enrollment, not only current enrollment, but where we are projected to be over the next 5 years. And the reason for us to discuss the enrollment, as we've talked about, Tina mentioned and Mr. McBride mentioned as well, the enrollment is really what dictates our budget as far as staffing levels and funding. So it's important that we look at where we were, where we are, and where we're going as far as enrollment. The data sources that we use for this report is the fall student count for each of the respective years that we're looking at. This year's count is actually based on the October 2nd fall count. As Superintendent Sybula mentioned, that was 3979.58 for our October 2019 count. So for purposes of my report, the number will reflect 3980 because I rounded up from 3979.58. The projections are based on the Middle Cities Enrollment Report, which was just provided to us on October 8th of this year. Middle Cities is an outside professional firm that specializes in enrollment projections for school districts throughout the state. They look at county birth rates, survival rates, migration rates out of the state, and to determine where they anticipate school districts will have enrollment. They only predict out with a validity of 5 years. They looked at 10 years, but they only want to talk about the 5 years because they feel that's much more accurate than trying to look out for a full 10 years. When looking at the report, we're going to break it out into our different building levels, then district-wide and statewide. We're going to start with the elementary enrollment. Again, as Mr. McBride had mentioned, had we taken this out to 2007, the decline would have been much more substantial. But even going out to the 12-13, keeping in line with the audit presentation, you'll notice at 12-13 we had 1,837 elementary students. This is K-5. 19-20, as of fall count, we were at 1,551, or a difference of 286 students in just that time period. Breaking it out by elementary school, Eddy obviously closed in the last year, but showing the difference of each of those different schools and where we're at, and where each school is at. Bell River, you can see, is at the top, followed by Gearing, then Pine River, and Palms. Looking at the projections provided by middle cities, they, as I mentioned, they take it out to 24-25. So in their projections, they are projecting an enrollment of 1,442. So even from our 1,551 this year, in the next 5 years, they're predicting another 110 loss at the elementary level. So over that time period from 12-13 to today, we've had a 16% decline, but from 12-13 to our projected 24-25, we will have a net decrease of 21% overall, or additional 110 loss in the next 5 years. Middle school, again, this is looking at just grades 6 through 8. Enrollment in 12-13 of 1028 to today of 973. As you will notice as we go through the middle school and high school, you will not see as much of a decline at the middle school and high school levels currently as you see at the elementary, because we are in that phase where our 6th grade class is one of our largest classes, and then we level out in elementary. So it kind of doesn't have the significance, but as those elementary school students move through the middle school and high school, you'll see that the projections are much greater as far as a decrease. It's St. Clair Middle School and Marine City Middle, 575 today and 398 for Marine City Middle. Again, the projection, 1028 and 1213 down to 803 for the middle schools. And again, keeping in mind that decline will continue as all the grades move forward. To date, from 12-13, we've seen a 5% decline, but again, as I mentioned, it only increases into the future up to a 22% decline in middle school enrollment by 24-25. Moving on to our high schools, current enrollment at the 3 high schools is 1419 compared to 1604 in 12-13, or 185 student difference. This is showing the enrollment at each of the 3 high schools, St. Clair High, Marine City High, and Riverview East, over that same time period. Our projected high school enrollment is expected to decline by 420 students from 12-13 to 24-25. Again, this is significant because of the foundational allowance and our staffing levels. And the percentage change there, again, you can see 12% actual from 12-13 to a projected 26% decrease in 24-25 from where it had been in 12-13. And looking at the district enrollment, this is not just K-12. This includes our early childhood special ed students, of which we have 37 currently. So you may see numbers in a little different way, but just keep in mind this is K-12 plus our early childhood special ed. District-wide, as I mentioned, 3980 as of our fall count, but just in 12-13 we were at 4523 for a difference of 543 in a 7-year time span. Again, if we had gone back to 2007, it would have been even more significant, or a total of 1,800 students back to 2000. 7. Our projected district enrollment total, 3464 in 24-25, which is a decrease of 1,059 students in 12 years. And this, again, is all based on the Middle Cities report. And these numbers are pretty similar to what we saw at the building levels, but 12% from 12-13 district-wide to 23% projected by 24-25. And this is where a large part of our differences come in. I know Superintendent Sybula has talked about this in the past, but our incoming kindergartners compared to our graduating seniors every year is where our biggest difference is. 1920, we had a difference of 238 kindergartners, but 378 seniors that we graduated last year. So that was the 140 student difference. So we've taken that out and extrapolated each grade level until they're seniors, and then used the kindergarten projection rates provided by Middle Cities to determine what the difference would be for each of those years coming up through 24-25. And then the estimated foundation allowance decrease that would result. Keep in mind, the estimated loss is based on this year's foundation allowance, which is $8,345. That is always obviously subject to the state budget, so that number can always change, but we just use that as an estimate to determine what our loss would be over the time period there. So you don't have to add up all those numbers. That is a $5.5 million total loss. A large part of that are county birth rates, which is interesting. In 2009, the county had 1,780 births, which meant those students are now in 6th grade. We have 329 6th graders. In 2015, which would be this year's kindergartners, the birth rate was 1,523. And so we have 238 kindergartners. So there is a strong correlation between the birth rates. The 2019 birth rates for the county is estimated to be 1,450, which would mean we would have 73 less when they become kindergartners. So that's basically how Middle Cities uses their projections. But again, as I mentioned, they also look at housing starts, survival rates, and migration. As far as statewide enrollment, it's not anything, the decline in enrollment is not unusual to East China. It is something that is occurring statewide. In fact, right now we are at our lowest point in 60 years as far as K-12 enrollment throughout the state of Michigan. Michigan is facing a 13% decline in enrollment since fall of 2002. In 1971 was the highest number of students in the state of Michigan K-12 at 2.1 million. But since 2014-15, there has never been an enrollment greater than 1.5 million statewide. So again, mostly related to birth rates, and unfortunately, people migrating outside of the state. Hopefully that's picking back up, but at that point, you can see how significant it is for the state as a whole. And again, just looking at that graphically as to where we're at statewide. Any questions regarding enrollment before I hand it over to Superintendent Sybula? Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you, Don. Good evening, President Frank and board members. It's a little hard to follow those numbers. It's we hear about it in the news often, that our K-12 enrollment numbers are low across the state, but when you see the impact to our general fund budget and what I know what that means as far as distributing resources and things that we can purchase for our students, that's very difficult information to continue to be reminded of. What I'm going to talk about tonight is I'm going to look at our data in a little bit different way. I'm going to look at our building utilization of the schools here in East China, because as we closely monitor that enrollment, It's also critical that we monitor the utilization of our buildings, which in turn reflects how we're utilizing or using all of our resources. Now, our resources could be things such as our staffing, our instructional resources, our curriculum materials, our counseling services. All of those things, when we say the term resources, that's what we're referring to. And they're limited by our operational cost, which is limited by the number of students, or dictated by the number of students that we have. If we have low utilization rates, we in turn have higher instructional costs. So you may have heard this before, but I just wanted to remind folks that the state of Michigan Treasury requirements for a qualified bond, their benchmarking, are for school districts to have 80 to 85% utilization for newly constructed buildings, and remodeled school buildings must have a 65% or greater utilization rate. It is important for school districts to consider these numbers because when you're looking at qualified bonds, it's important for a district to be able to use the state's credit rating for lower bond rates and less interest costs, as well as these bonds are backed by the state. So in order for those things to happen, you need to be able to demonstrate a 65% or greater utilization. Now, this calculation is determined by building utilization percentage. And it is done by taking the district's general education instructional areas available, dividing it by the students that are receiving instruction in those areas. So let me say that again. We're going to take the district's general education instructional areas available and divide it by the number of students that are receiving instruction in those areas. So let's look at some of our utilization rates. Now this slide looks at our district school building utilization as a whole, starting in school year 2012-2013 through this school year. Oops, did I go forward? You can see that the rate drops between 1 to 2% each school year until this school year, when Eddy Elementary was closed. We went from a district utilization rate of 68% to 73%. Now, using the projected percentages below that, below this year, it's the Middle Cities data again that Don Demick was using, and it was from this year's study. We continue to see a decline of 1 to 2% down to school year 2024-2025. Now, this next slide allows us to look at the utilization rates of our elementary school buildings. You will notice that Bell River and Pine River show different capacities, even though they are the same building. I wanted to point this out because you'll see here up at the top the capacity right there for Bell River and the capacity for Pine River are different, even though they're identical buildings. And this is due to the fact that the formula that I talked about earlier only allows you to use general education teaching spaces, and Pine River has 2 self-contained special education classrooms, so we can't use those spaces in the formula, so they're not included. Just as in the district rates, the elementary rates decline a total of 1 to 2% a year until this year, again, when Eddy Elementary closed and the 5th graders went to St. Clair Middle School. The elementary percent at that time went from 65 back up to a 69%. If we were to keep our current configuration of buildings, the projected loss is approximately 2% a year. And you can follow the building, the district is here on this side, and that would get us all the way down through the Middle Cities projected years of 24-25 to a 60% district-wide utilization rate. The circled numbers, the red circles around those utilization percentages are indicating that those buildings are operating or projected to operate below the 65% benchmark recommended by Michigan Department of Treasury. This next slide is the middle school and high schools utilization rates. Keep in mind, as Mrs. Demick mentioned earlier, that the smaller classes, our largest class is our 6th grade class, are still in those elementary grades. Our last big, in quotes, class in our district is 329 students. After that, our K-5 average class size district-wide is 258. So their utilization rates are here for this school year. This is the Marine City complex. Because Marine City shares their teaching spaces for middle school, high school, Riverview East, they have, we've calculated their capacity together. And then we have St. Clair Middle School, St. Clair High School, and then the district as a whole. This next slide is the projected enrollment numbers for the elementary with the recommendation of reducing our instructional area capacity. So what you see here on this slide is moving forward in an effort to best use our resources for our students, increase our efficiency, increase our utilization rate. We're looking at closing a facility in order to reach those efficiencies. So if I could point out some numbers here. These were on a former slide showing the closing of Eddy, getting us Bell River at a 68% utilization rate, Gearing at 89, Palms at 55, Pine River at 63. If next school year, 2021, if we left things as is, these would be our utilization rates. Palms would drop that 2% to 53%. Pine River would drop to a 61% from their 63%. If we reduce our utilization spaces, our instructional spaces, reduce our instructional spaces to increase our utilization rates, you can see then that Bell River then would go from that 66 to an 80% utilization rate, with Pine River remaining constant, Gearing remaining constant, and Eddy still closed. So the district is making the recommendation that we reduce our general education instructional area capacity. Let's look at what that would mean. So that would mean closing Palms Elementary for the 2021 school year, therefore increasing our district building utilization both at the building level and at the district level. That would give us an estimated annual expenditure reduction in that budget that we know so dearly needs some help with a reduction of our student population of approximately $374,000. And it provides us some programming benefits, increased teacher collaboration, some learning environment options when you have more students in a school building. That gives you increased opportunities for the programs that Mr. Russell was speaking of earlier, and a lot of our buildings run for addressing the social and emotional needs, the instructional needs, the intervention programming that is needed for students as they develop at different levels. So overall, what it allows us to do by increasing those utilization rates is give us a better use of our district resources. As we know they continue to decline, we are allocating them in a way that we can give more opportunities and continued opportunities for each and every one of our students. And although closing a school building is never an easy decision, or one taken lightly, we have a great staff, we have great teachers and administrators who will always do what is best for our students. So the recommendation made by administration this evening for the board to consider is closing Palms Elementary for the 2020-2021 school year. Can I answer any questions for you, or can Tino or Mrs. Demick regarding the information presented this evening?
Can you just highlight where that $374,000 savings, where that comes from?
Sure, Tina, can you help me with that one? It's a combination of the operational cost of the building itself, along with.
Well, that is making up primarily salaries and benefits. With this occurring, we have natural retirements that occur 5 to 6 every year. So there'd be no loss of actual positions. It would just be positions not being refilled. I have this as a 30% reduction to our utilities because we will keep the ownership of the building. If we were to sell the building, that would be an additional reduction to our annual expenditures. There are things like snow removal. We'd still cut the grass, but that would, those costs would remain. There'd be some of the supplies. The supply budgets, a portion of them would be transitioned to the new classrooms, but we would incur some savings through that. There's savings, for example, through telephones. The majority are salaries and benefits, so.
Thank you, Tina. Mrs. Sybula, what would this look like as far as the students?
As far as?
So if the building closes in 2021, where will our kids go?
Okay, let me go back. With this recommendation here, you'll notice on the right-hand side that 5th grade from Bell River and Palms Elementary would move to the Marine City Middle School, just as they did in St. Clair last year with the closing of Eddy Elementary.
So then
the rest would go to Bell River Elementary.
So all of their peers, all the kids are going to
Yes.
stay together.
Yes.
And a lot of the staff would be moving with the students?
Correct. Those wonderful staffs that we heard and that we're well aware of would go with their students, would follow with the students.
Okay. So when would we be discussing this next? I know there was a concern that the next discussion would be during parent-teacher conferences, but I believe the administration was aware of that, and we've made some compromises for a special meeting of some sort.
Yes. There's a special board workshop scheduled for November 4th. It was published about a week ago. And if anything further needs to be discussed, we can continue to schedule a board workshop as needed. But we were aware of the parent-teacher conferences and wanted to make accommodations for that. So it'll be at the same time of our regular board meetings at 6 p.m. on November 4th. Well, if there aren't any further questions, please feel free to email or call me as things come up. I know that Tina, Dawn, and I presented a lot of information this evening in 3 different areas: the areas of budget, the areas of enrollment, and in the area of utilization of our school buildings. So please communicate with myself if you have any concerns or questions as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mrs. Sybula, Ms. Dimick, and Mrs. Thrift. Okay, the next item on our agenda is closed session. Before we look for a motion to move into closed session, I'd just like to make a mention that when we come out of closed session, we do have 2 action items that we'll be voting on: the audit report for the fiscal year 2018-19 and the central office construction bids. And then moving on to next regular board meeting, right now we have the summer tax resolution on that agenda. So at this time, I need a motion that the Board of Education goes into closed session pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act, Act 267 of 1976. That being for board discussion connected with the negotiations of a collective bargaining agreement. I'll need a motion, a second, and then we will do a roll call vote.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, any discussion before we vote? Okay, Mrs. Cedar?
Yes.
Mr. Western?
Here.
Ms. Spebuck?
Yes.
Ms. Griefor? Yes. Mr. Disselrath?
Yes.
Okay, so the board will go into closed session at this time. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We appreciate your support and your